greenhouse gases contribute 41% to our atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases. Next, please. In fact, other greenhouse, that was right. Back one. There was a bit of an animation in there, Bob. Go back a slide, please.
There we go. There.
Okay, perfect. So the other greenhouse gases actually contribute some 35% to the warming of the planet. So we ignore the other greenhouse gases at our peril, but also if we do something which reduces our carbon dioxide emissions, but which increases the emissions of other greenhouse gases, we are potentially actually behind the 8-ball even more so. Okay, next, thanks, Bob. We're on a bit of a delay out here, so that's why it takes a while for me to realize you've advanced it. So let's talk a little about this product called fossil gas. What happens when we are extracting fossil gas from the ground and processing it and transmitting it? What happens is this thing called leakage or fugitive emissions. We need to understand that natural gas is somewhere between 85 and 95% methane. So it's methane that we're really concerned about here. Bob Howarth back in 2014, and I think this was really about the time that we started to become concerned about natural gas, was the work of Bob Howarth and his colleagues at Cornell. He calculated that if the leakage of natural gas reaches 2.8%, then that negates that combustion benefit of gas over coal. And so if it goes much above 2.8%, we can rest assured that natural gas is actually worse as a global warming agent than is coal even. Howarth also calculated the leakage or fugitive emissions from conventional natural gas and from shale frac natural gas. And he found from conventional natural gas, the leakage was about 5.8%. And for shale frac natural gas, and unfortunately, most of the natural gas that's out there these days is shale frac natural gas, the actual leakage is up around 5.8%. So we can see that, the conventional is 3.8 and the shale frac is up around 5.8%. And we can see from that, compared to the break-even point, that shale frac natural gas, according to Howarth's calculations, is considerably worse than coal. Schneising in 2014 reported that for shale frac natural gas, he was recording values of 9.5%. And then Bob Howarth himself came back with a review in 2015 and said for shale fracking, he was getting values up around 12%. Next. This is a summary of the leakage estimates that come from natural gas. This chart was prepared around 2014, and so you can see that the dates of the studies are all before 2014. And then a paper by Alvarez et al. Came out in 2018, which put the value at 2.3%. But the key point to note here is I put a line down where that cutoff is that Bob Howarth was telling us about, of 2.8%. And you can see how many studies on the fugitive emissions of methane from natural gas full life cycle are around that 2.8% value, some a bit below and some of them considerably above. So we should not just look at the combustion product of natural gas, we have to look at the full life cycle. Next. So here's my summary. We know fossil gas combustion emissions of carbon dioxide are substantial. Natural gas power plants in Oregon emitted 17% of our total 2019 regulated greenhouse gases in terms of just from the combustion of the fuel. Studies suggest that the added emissions of methane from the natural gas life cycle place this fossil, as I've argued, near or over the line in comparison to coal. Natural gas is likely to be worse than coal. For these reasons, the drive to electrification and conversion of power plants to renewables should be encouraged. Thank you, gang. That's it.
Thank you, Alan. And Alan's a real hero today for, oh, did you want to talk about this last slide?
No, I didn't want that slide. If we get to talk about renewable natural gas, we can come back to this one, but I didn't want to show it.
Great. Okay. Well, let's take, thank you, Alan. And everyone should really thank Alan because he just realized this afternoon that he was doing this tonight. So brilliant. Thank you. If anybody would like to ask Alan a question before we move into the next presentation, we could do that. If you could just type your question into the chat. And then we'll be coming back to Q&A for the whole panel at the end. So way to go, Alan. Okay. All right. Well, let's keep moving then, and you'll have a chance to ask questions.
Jim is on this call. The Dragoviches are on this call.
I'm sorry. Okay. Why is there no control of the burning leaks at methane fracking sites? Is a question for you, Alan.
Why is there no control of the burning leaks at methane fracking sites? This is kind of an interesting question. If, in fact, ironically, if methane is actually leaking out of the sites, it's better off, we're better off if they burn it, because that turns the methane into carbon dioxide, which is not as serious a greenhouse gas as the methane would be. But what happens, as far as I understand it, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on fracking technology, but what I understand is that the natural gas companies, the fossil gas companies, would really love to not be causing leaks, because obviously when they leak gas, that's they're leaking money. But they seem to be unable to prevent themselves from doing it. Another interesting point is sometimes folks from the natural gas industry will conduct studies on very new plants, and they will say, well, look, we did this study on a new plant and the leakage is way down. But the expected life cycle of these facilities can run into the decades. And so inevitably they're going to age, and inevitably, as it turns out, they're going to start leaking. Concrete leaks, and that's how they seal them. They cracks and they leak.
Okay, Alan, we have another question. Do we have estimates of leakage from our gas water heaters, gas furnaces, and gas cooktops?
I don't have information on that. There's probably, maybe one of the other panelists does, but there's probably a little leakage. And I'm sure when we get into the health consequences of natural gas, we'll hear something about that, because methane is not healthy. But the gas comes to us under pressure. And as it comes through the pipelines, those pipelines, as they age, inevitably start leaking. And so particularly at the compression station. So the transmission of the gas from the processing plant to us also results in leakage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, I think that's a good segue to our next speaker. Our next speaker is David Farah, who is a public health toxicologist for the Oregon Health Authority. David has worked on human health risk assessment, risk communication, and production of public health assessment documents for the general public, with a special focus on Superfund and other hazardous waste sites. He also provides ongoing assistance to the Oregon DEQ and US EPA. David, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. And we think we have your presentation up.
It looks right to me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, good. All right, so yes, I'm David Farah, toxicologist with Oregon Health Authority. And the focus of my talk is going to be a bit of a shift from the previous talk. So the last talk was focused primarily on the potential of fossil gas and combustion products of fossil gas to lead to global warming, which is a real concern. It is a true and real concern. So I don't want to at all minimize that. It's just that my focus though is going to be on health risks that are much closer to an individual person. So I'm going to be focusing on the risks that are related to combustion of natural gas and leakage of natural gas inside of a house, and what that means for the health of the person who lives inside that house. Okay, so next slide, please. So the first place I'd like to start is to just let you know that indoor air quality is almost always worse than outdoor air. Exceptions include extraordinary events like the intense wildfire smoke that we experienced this past fall. But with climate change, we expect more frequent, longer lasting, and worse wildfires in Oregon. So there may be more such times in the future. Indoor air quality is worse than outdoor air because indoor pollutants are sheltered from elements like moisture and sunlight that break down pollutants outdoors, and because the pollutants are restricted from dispersing and mixing like they do outdoors. There are also indoor sources of pollution, like off-gassing volatile organic compounds from furniture and building materials, mold spores from excess humidity, activities that stir up dust, and indoor combustion, including things like smoking, burning incense, fireplaces, wood stoves, candles. But for the rest of this talk, I'm going to be focusing on cooking as an indoor combustion source, the one that we do the most probably. But the ways to improve indoor air quality that I'll mention at the end apply to all sources of indoor air pollution, regardless of the source. Okay, next slide, please. So burning anything results in emissions to air that can be harmful to health. So again, this is focusing just on the health of the person who's in the house where something's being burned. Okay, not looking at overall potential to contribute to climate change. So from that perspective, from the perspective of the health of someone living in the house, natural gas is cleaner burning than almost any fuel. It emits less particulate matter and other pollutants than other fuels when combusted. So that's what the sizes of the clouds over these different burning products is sort of meant to relate not exactly proportionally, but just to give you the idea that, you know, if you're sitting next to a wood fire that's emitting more pollution to you than burning coal, and that's emitting more than burning oil, and that's emitting more than burning natural gas. However, natural gas is not emissions free. It emits less pollutants than other things that you could burn, but it's not zero. And for the purposes of indoor air quality, I want to point out too that even cooking with an electric range produces emissions to indoor air. So anytime that you see smoke or steam, anything coming off of a pan on a stove, it's emitting something to the indoor air, and that's that may be important for health. Okay, next slide. So here are some of the components from natural gas combustion. I'll spell out the abbreviation. So the VOCs stands for volatile organic compounds. And formaldehyde that's listed there is actually one example of a volatile organic compound. These are just light molecules that easily become gas in the air. Nitrogen dioxide is there, carbon monoxide, which is pretty toxic, and that we have, a lot of people know that already. We have carbon monoxide detectors in most houses, we hope. If you don't have one, I do recommend you get one. Carbon monoxide is odorless and invisible, but it can kill you. Particulate matter is this PM 2.5 means particulate matter that is 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller. And these particles are a significant portion of outdoor air pollution this has a lot of health ramifications. And when a wildfire happens, that releases a lot of PM 2.5, and so does road traffic. And there are other things that are emitted when you combust natural gas. So next slide, please. So if concentrated at high enough levels, the pollutants that I listed up in the previous slide can cause health problems with the respiratory system and the heart. And these are the most affected. There's some evidence that other systems of the body can be affected also. Nitrogen dioxide can increase a child's risk of developing asthma. So this is an important thing. So some chemicals can make it more likely for a child to get asthma if they don't have it already. But there's a lot more chemicals that can make asthma symptoms worse for someone who already had asthma. So nitrogen dioxide can do both things. It can increase the risk of a child getting asthma if they don't already have it. And for people who have asthma, it can make symptoms worse and can trigger attacks. There is a health-based national ambient air quality standard for nitrogen dioxide. It's based on respiratory irritation. And it is possible so if you do everything wrong with burning natural gas inside, which would mean, and I'll get to some of this stuff later, which would mean things like not having any ventilation and being in a small space, you can get nitrogen dioxide levels inside of a kitchen or inside of a house to be higher than that health-based national ambient air quality standard. It's designed for outdoor air. So that is important to know. Nitrogen dioxide and other contaminants that I mentioned, especially the particulate matter, can increase the risk of acute heart events that can lead to premature death in people that have pre-existing heart problems. There's less evidence about whether or not it can cause heart problems someone who doesn't have them. But if you already have a pre-existing heart condition, then particulate matter in particular can trigger an acute event, like a heart attack. And then a lot of the other contaminants, like formaldehyde and other volatile organic compounds, can lead to an increased risk of developing cancer over the course of a lifetime, various types of cancers. And then other than cancer, there is also some evidence that some of these can increase the risk of diabetes or make diabetes worse. Particulate matter has some links to neurological effects, like neurodevelopmental effects in children, or neurodegenerative effects in older adults.
David, I think you hit your mute. There you go.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm trying to can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'll keep going then.
Thank you.
So because outdoor air, oh, sorry, next slide, please. So because outdoor air is almost always better quality than indoor air, the solution to most indoor air quality problems is getting enough ventilation. The more frequently you can turn over the air in your house with fresh air from outside, the better the indoor air quality will be. For cooking, in particular, range hoods are a really excellent way to mitigate health risks related to cooking. And that's even regardless of the heating source. Even if you have a range hood, even if you cook with electric, it's a good idea to run that hood. If you do have a range hood, it's important to check some things. So some range hoods just recirculate air back into the room that you're in. And there's like a little bit of filtration, but not enough to make a difference really for improving health. So, you know, you a lot of times above the range hood, there's people have like a little tiny cupboard, and sometimes you put, like, we store our nice glasses in there because we don't use them very much and it's hard to get in there. So, but if you have a good range hood will be venting to outside. And one way you can tell that is if there's something taking up space in that little cupboard. There should be like some kind of, you should be able to see something in there that is going up above the range hood and taking the air out. If you have a range hood, our advice is to make sure to use it. A lot of times people don't use it because it's noisy, and that's sad. And there's some efforts going on to make better range hoods that don't make so much noise. But the most, so in California, they did a study and found that less than 35% of people who have a range hood actually use it when they're cooking. And noise was the most frequently cited reason that people don't use their range hoods. In Oregon, building codes require that any new construction that includes gas cooking appliances includes a range hood that vents to outside. But there's still a lot of older housing that was built before that code was in place, and so it's possible to find lots of houses that maybe don't have any venting above the range. Sometimes it's just a gas range and in an enclosed room. And this touches on an issue that we call environmental justice at the Oregon Health Authority, where some people are disproportionately impacted by environmental problems. And the example that applies here is that it's often lower income families that are more likely to have bad indoor air quality. They're less likely to be able to afford installing a range hood if they don't have one. And they're less likely to have a range hood because they're oftentimes only able to afford older housing. So people with lower income can be disproportionately affected by this particular problem in houses. Improvements in indoor air quality can be made. So I hope if you don't have a range hood, I don't want people to despair or panic. Even without one, there's ways that you can increase ventilation when you're cooking. It even helps even just to open windows and maybe even put a box fan in a window and blow air out the window. So you're blowing the air out. Or if you have, if you can open up more windows and get kind of a cross breeze going through. So there are simple ways to improve ventilation, even if you don't have a range hood. Okay, next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and this is changing gears just a little bit and moving closer to the direction that the last speaker was talking about. So burning any fossil fuels contributes to global climate change. And there are a lot of public health effects from climate change. We've seen a lot of them already, like with increasing wildfires in Oregon. And again, I again want to point out the disproportionate impacts that certain communities bear when there is something like a wildfire. And this sort of creates a spiral with the wildfires in particular, where wildfires release more carbon dioxide, and besides the carbon dioxide, they're also releasing a lot more particulate matter and carbon monoxide and other pollutants that I talked about that are relevant for human health. So, and climate change also increases drought conditions, and we know that drought conditions that improves the environment for blue-green algae. I don't know if people have been paying attention to that or not, but these are microorganisms that grow in warm water that get a lot of sunlight, and these can produce toxins that are in the water. So drinking water, public drinking water sources, or any drinking water source that is fed from surface water, where these blue-green algae can live, can be affected by the toxins. And the best example of that was recent in 2018, when the city of Salem had to close down their public water system because of toxins from blue-green algae in their up on Detroit Lake. So climate change itself has a big effect on public health. and burning. So besides the direct effects of burning things inside the house, contributing to climate change also affects public health. And I just wanted to point out, if you're interested in that kind of information about the way that climate change affects health, we did recently release a report from the Oregon Health Authority called this 2020 report called Climate and Health in Oregon. And the URL for it is there at the bottom. And it includes a lot more information like I just described, like the different ways that a changing climate affects public health and especially has disproportionate impacts on people who are less able to adapt to those challenges. I think that's all the slides that I have. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, David. I was wondering, so, you know, I think a lot of people now, because of the smoke, have air filters or, you know, other things in their home to try to improve the indoor air quality. Can you talk a little bit about that? And other people, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat.
Yeah, for sure. So if you, there are portable filters that you can buy, and those can be expensive. Generally speaking, like the better they filter, the more expensive they are. But one thing that was really helpful that we learned from some partners in the Puget Sound Air Quality Division was that, so they took, some people have started making these do-it-yourself filters, and they work really pretty well. What they found in Puget Sound Air District is that they work just about as well as these expensive filters. So they're pretty easy to make. You just take a box fan, and you can take a furnace filter. It's MERV 13 or higher. There's a rating system for furnace filters called the MERV rating scale, MERV.
Mm-hmm.
If you get MERV 13 or higher, and you stick that filter to the back of your box fan,
Mm-hmm.
It does a pretty good job of filtering particulate matter out of the air. It won't get the gases like carbon monoxide or the volatile organic compounds, but it does a good job with the particulate matter, which is one of the biggest health risks related to that kind of pollution.
Mm-hmm.
You do have to be mindful of the size of your room. Like the best time to be using it is at those times when outside smoke is really bad. It's like so bad outside you don't want to be opening windows.
Right.
Then what you can do is close up a room and run that fan with the filter on it in that room, and it can do a pretty good job of cleaning the air in it can create kind of a clean room within your house during those times when wildfire smoke is really bad outside.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Oh, I see a question about carbon monoxide that's generated from the use of natural gas in homes.
Okay.
That does happen. Carbon monoxide is generally produced most when you have inefficient combustion. So when you have like when you burn wood, it's low. Yeah.
David, we're having a hard time hearing you, and your screen is frozen. So I don't really.
Am I having a lag? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, but it's very broken up and having a little connection problem, I think. Yeah, maybe you try the phone for audio.
Yeah.
I'm going to give David just a second, and then we could also go on to the next speaker, allow him to get his technology fixed. That's probably what we should do. So you could ask him questions in the chat and he could respond there. And then but right for now, we'll move on to our next speaker. Oh, David, I see you moving now. Let's see if we could hear you. Maybe not. There we try.
Okay, how is this?
Oh, that's so much better.
Okay,
Good.
I hope so.
Okay.
My phone dropped. I was on phone before, but it dropped the call. So that's what happened in the middle there.
Okay, so there are two questions there in the chat. What about the carbon monoxide that is generated from use of natural gas in homes?
Yeah, so there's definitely not carbon monoxide that's released when you burn anything, but it's usually a problem of inefficient combustion. So like low temperature fires. So in that way, burning natural gas is actually better than other things that you could burn in your house to because it's an efficient flame. It burns really hot, and so it's efficiently turned over all the way to carbon dioxide, which is what you want. But anyone who has gas appliances in their house really should have a carbon monoxide detector, because, like I said, you can't smell it and you can't see it. It doesn't have that that rotten egg smell when you have like a gas leak in the house. That's an additive to the unburned methane. So you don't smell that when there's carbon monoxide. So it's much more dangerous. So you should have a carbon monoxide detector.
Right. And then the other question was, do we know what the levels of the pollutants you described would be in a home with a gas stove? Because you mentioned several pollutants.
Yeah, so I don't know the numbers for all of them. Like I said, generally they're higher inside than outside. For the nitrogen dioxide in particular, that's one contaminant. The national standard for outdoor air is 100 parts per billion, and you can get higher than that level if you're burning natural gas in a home, if you don't use any ventilation, and if you're in a small space. So if you have a small kitchen, doors are closed, like you can get there, but having some ventilation does a pretty good job of dispersing and getting rid of that nitrogen dioxide.
Right. Okay. And someone mentions the gas company will come out and test your stove for effectiveness. And then another question here, considering that OHA knows about the unsafe indoor air quality that gas stoves and cooktops produce, shouldn't they suggest warnings be applied to those appliances? Is that something that OHA has been involved in?
Well, I mean, I think when you buy any gas appliance, someone else could probably check me on this, make sure I'm correct, but I do think that they come with some kind of a warning. They don't come from the Oregon Health Authority, but I think there's a federal standard that, if you buy any gas-powered appliance, I think there's some kind of warning on there that what to be careful about. And they do recommend that you run, if you have a range hood, especially now with the way that the building codes are, if you have if they put in a gas stove, they have to put in a range hood, and they'll tell you should run it, like when you're cooking with it.
Okay, great. Okay, David, thanks so much. And you're going to stick around, I hope, because we'll accept more Q&A at the end. But let's move on to our next speaker, who is Tom Grayley. And Tom is joining us from Berkeley tonight. And Tom is co-leader of the Berkeley Climate Action Coalition. I think you need to go back a slide. Electrification Working Group. And the Electrification Working Group is focused on facilitating the electrification of homes. Buildings in California represent 20 to 25% of the state's total greenhouse gas emissions, and natural gas use in buildings represents 10% of total state greenhouse gas emissions. So the EWG, Electrification Working Group, goal is to help reduce these emissions by raising public awareness of electrification, providing the information and resources homeowners need to transition from natural gas to electric appliances, and advocating for legislative and regulatory changes that support electrification. Okay, Tom, take it away. Thank you for being here.
Okay, you're welcome. So it's a pleasure being here. So as she said, I am going to take a look at the progress of natural gas, fossil gas bans as they have been moving across the country. So next slide, please. Okay, there was 2 slides that went in there, but we'll go with that. Okay, so the city of Berkeley started this off in 2019, in July of 2019, with a ban on gas hookups for new residences. And much to everyone's surprise, our local gas and electric company came on board and said, we support that. We think everybody ought to electrify. That's probably because we have one company that supplies both gas and electricity. And so it's energy to them, and they're more than happy to supply electricity if you want it. So the building code that the city of Berkeley used is a thing in California called Title 24, which is a building efficiency regulation for new buildings. And cities are allowed to go beyond the minimum requirements of a particular code and to try to go beyond that to make the buildings even more efficient. And that is the mechanism by which Berkeley used to get the gas ban through. So next slide, please. So with Berkeley starting it off, we now have over 60 local governments either adopted or actively exploring that. Approximately 40 plus of those entities, government entities listed there, have in fact have some form of gas ban. Nationally, we see New York City has signed on to be gas free by 2030, so it's a little bit away. Seattle also. And in addition, we have 2 states that are considering statewide gas bans, and that's California and Washington. Next slide, please. That's a real dense slide there, and I'm not going to make any attempt to really go through the kind of nitty-gritty of it, but this is just up there to indicate that practically every city had their own little take on what a gas ban meant, and very few of them just completely did a very flat outright. One of the big stumbling points for a lot of the cities were those gas stoves, which we just heard about. And so many people don't want to lose that gas stove. There's something very visceral about people's cooking, and they develop a relationship with that stove in which they provide food for themselves and their family. In fact, we kind of had that kind of experience ourselves about 10, 12 years ago. We had a 1930s Wedgwood stove, and it just started leaking, and I kept having to touch it and work on it, and parts were almost impossible to get. So we finally had to reluctantly get rid of it and replace it. And at that point, we just put in a modern gas stove. We're hoping to have an induction stove soon. So next slide, please. So I think this headline says it all. Needless to say, the gas companies didn't like the idea of their product being banned by anybody. And especially when they started seeing this spread across, in particularly Northern California first, they reacted to that. One of the really big companies in Southern California is Southern California Gas. In the southern part of the state, the gas and electric are 2 different companies, and they are actively pressing cities to stop the gas bans. Their banner is consumer choice, and so and they have actually gotten a number of cities to say consumer choice was what they wanted. So let's go to the next slide, please. So these are just some of the companies, the associations and companies that have fought the gas bans. And I'm going to direct your attention to the 2 in the lower left-hand side. The first one is the National Restaurant Association. They in fact sued Berkeley when the gas ban got implemented, and Berkeley did manage to get that through the court and have it approved. The other one right above it is the Utility Workers Union of America. And needless to say, the workers themselves in the gas industry are extremely concerned about losing their source of employment. And so they have been very active in supporting companies like SoCalGas and others in terms of fighting the gas bans. There has been a lot of discussion in the environmental community and in government regarding what to do about the gas workers if in fact we are successful in reducing or potentially eliminating the use of natural gas in homes and in other places, which we really have to do. And so they've been looking at what would be a just transition. And there is a model that has been implemented in California. There's a Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, which is scheduled for shutdown, I think in 2 years or 3 years from now. And so what happened with that was that the company, government, and the unions all got together and developed a plan for the workers and how they would be, between pensions and a variety of other workplace processes. They developed a plan that everyone signed on to. Upper right-hand side is SoCalGas. They fought gas bans in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara, and they even sued the state regarding over a clean truck process that was a clean truck regulation that the state of California implemented, and which because they own natural gas distribution facilities that are aimed at providing natural gas to trucks, they sued the state of California on it. Nationally, the upper left, the American Gas Association has been leading the charge across the country, and they have attempted to enforce state gas bans. So if you go to the next slide. So these are the states in red that have already implemented gas bans, meaning they say the cities cannot implement a gas ban. The ones that are shaded there are the states that have laws under consideration. Apparently, the perfect trifecta for getting these gas bans implemented is both houses of the legislature as well as the governor being in Republican hands. And so those are the primary states where these gas bans have been implemented. So that's the story on gas bans today across the states. I don't know if there's any gas bans in Oregon. Maybe somebody could tell me if that's in fact happening, but it would be interesting to know if there's any progress in this area within the state. Mm-hmm. So before I leave, I'd like to address a couple of things here that were already spoken. I have seen studies regarding gas leakage in homes, and it's can be as high as 1%. That little regulator that sits outside your house as the gas enters in, it's usually a circular thing. The way they regulate the pressure is they just release gas in order to not in order to not get too much pressure into the house. And then the older the appliances, the more likely you are to have gas leakage. The thing that is really prone for leakage in homes tend to be the shutoff valves for the various appliances. So it's something that you need to look at very closely. Yeah. The other question that I'd like to address was somebody asked a question about flaring. And in the last months of the previous administration in Washington, a rule was created that banned the EPA from regulating methane leaks and flaring throughout the United States. And so the current administration is attempting to change that regulation, but that's where we stand right now. It was an Obama, originally it was an Obama level regulation that got implemented, and then it was changed in the Trump administration, and now it's going back again, hopefully. So I can take any questions.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tom. There's already a couple questions in the chat, and I think this has really built quite a narrative, I think, between the three presentations. It's really quite interesting. I'm going to ask a couple, I think, what are, maybe dumb questions or something that you said. I just want to be really clear. What is the nature of the ban in Berkeley? Is it just on new construction, did you say?
Yes, it's only new construction. And so if you have an existing house, we encourage you, that's the organization I'm primarily dealing with. We encourage, electrification of various facilities and, within the home, but no, it's only for new construction.
And does the city then provide any incentives for residents to make that conversion?
We are awaiting what's being called BEBE, B-E-B-E, which is Berkeley's existing building electrification program, which is to be introduced next month. And I am not privy at this point to the details. The city is being somewhat secretive about it at the moment. And so I expect to have, there is a program that they are developing, and so I expect to see that sometime next month.
Okay. And what has been the reaction of the citizens of Berkeley to this? Has there been resistance?
There has been some minor resistance. What I think they saw was a sudden increase in the number of housing permits that got issued right before the ban went into effect, so that people could still do that. But in general, it's the builders and the architects, and most of the architects are just fine. The builders that I am aware of, they go, well, yeah, I guess we have to do that. So they're moving into it just like the rest of us are. Not everybody is on all the way to do everything, but the movement is good. And
do you see what kind of movement do you see in the restaurant community? Do you see restaurants using induction more, or?
So our local utility, PG&E, in fact, has a commercial cooking demonstration facility where it prior to COVID, it actually ran in-person classes and heavily promoted the use of induction cooking and a variety of other things. And so it's a very active program, and I would say that not great success. I think the chefs really have a great deal of difficulty if they were trained on one particular thing, just like us. We like the stove that we like to cook on. But at the same time, if you've ever had the opportunity to go to a Michelin-starred restaurant, chances are that your food was probably cooked on an induction cooktop because of the kind of control that they can have with it, the kind of temperature control and stuff. So the statistic that I've seen is 80% of the Michelin chefs, in fact, use induction cookware. I don't know for everything, but in fact, they do that.
Yeah, that's really great. And I'll just have to say, as a personal testimony, we had always cooked with gas, and we had a really nice gas stove in our house back east, and when we moved out here, we did convert to induction, and we've been really happy with it, and I find it actually more sensitive than the gas, and it's a little bit of a transition, but it's very sensitive, and we're very, very happy with it. So we've got some good questions here. Since we're talking about the cooking, who wants to explain how induction cooking works? I think I might be able to try it, but I'm not going to do it. So who's good at that? Tom, are you?
I can give it a shot. Sure. So the idea between induction cooking, induction is magnetic, and so it creates a magnetic field, and the magnetic field will make the electrons start moving around in cookware that has a high iron content. So if you have aluminum cookware, it doesn't work. But if you have a high iron contact cookware, like those black frying pans and things like that, or the Cuisinart, if you're into the fancy stuff, all of that cast iron cookware is excellent for this. Actually, the city of Berkeley has a tool lending library, and the latest addition to their tool lending library was an induction cooktop, along with a set of cookware, so that people could start experimenting with induction cooking.
Mm-hmm. And it's the stainless steel work on that too?
It depends. It depends on the iron content. I have one stainless steel pot. Doesn't work, but all the rest of them absolutely work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take a magnet. Take a magnet.
Yeah, if a magnet will stick to it, it would work. Yeah, when we bought our stove, we actually got a complimentary set of new cookware that came with the stove. You know, I think because they're worried that people are going to have that reaction, that, you know, worry about their cooking, their existing cookware. Can you briefly compare a regular electric stovetop to an electric induction stovetop, Tom, since you're our cooktop man for tonight?
Okay, a regular cooktop, even the glass type or the old kind with the little rings on it,
Yeah.
they create heat by resistance. Any kind of resistance heat is very power consumptive, meaning that if you cooked on, if you try to cook the same thing, you're going to use a lot more power to cook it on any kind of older electric stove or different style electric stove. So they use more power, and you don't have the control. One of the benefits of induction is that the cooktop stays relatively cool. One of the things that we do when we're doing live demonstrations is we'll have a boiling kettle on a little cooktop, and we'll have a dollar bill in between it, and the dollar bill just sits there. Now you get a little warmth from where the pot was, but you're unlike electric stoves that are with resistance, they don't stay as hot, and they're much safer to use.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So
no, not in the oven.
yeah. What do you tell people who are concerned about heating homes when the power is out?
Batteries are one. So heating homes when the power is out. It is, I don't have a good answer for that because it really is an issue. Even if you have gas furnaces, typically you're not going to be able to heat your home anyway, because your gas furnace uses electronic ignition to fire off the gas, and it uses a fan to blow the heat around. And so gas furnaces are usually useless in a power outage. If you have a gas stove, yes, you could turn on your oven and your burners, and you should open up your windows at that point to make sure you're not killing yourself with carbon monoxide and a variety of other things. I recently saw a picture from the Texas outage, which had this 10-year-old boy sitting in front of a stove with all 4 burners going. And, so it's a problem. And I don't think it has a good solution at this point. Maybe one of the other people here might have some ideas, but I don't see the good solution for this yet.
Yeah. I'm going to call on Alan a little bit here, just to give Tom a break. So I know that in some parts of the state, and I'm not sure about California, but in Oregon, that their natural gas is used for electricity. And I know there may be some regulations that are being discussed right now in Oregon that might be related to that. Is there something that you could share with us about that whole discussion about, is that with those, I'm not going to say any more, Alan, and get myself in trouble. You know what I'm referring to. Can you talk about it, please?
Yes. There is one of the things that's happening right now, I'm guessing, as a lot of folks know, is that we're working with The agencies are working on the governor's executive order, which is supposed to get us down to 80% below 1990 emissions levels by 2050. And part of that program is being set up by the Department of Environmental Quality. And one of the problems we have is our Department of Environmental Quality in its, no, not wisdom, but it has decided that it is going to recommend to the Environmental Quality Commission, when they finally approve the plan, that electricity would not be covered. Unfortunately, a substantial proportion, and I think you showed this in the beginning, Laurie, a substantial proportion of the electricity in Oregon is generated from natural gas powered generation plants. And I mentioned this when I was talking, that in fact, 17% of the greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide, that were emitted in 2019 came from those specific natural gas fueled power plants. There is a meeting of the Environmental Quality Commission. It's happening today and tomorrow. And we SOCAN have submitted testimony to them about the developing plan from Department of Environmental Quality opposing that recommendation that electricity be exempt from the plan. Because if that is exempt, then it is effectively undermines the ability of Oregon to meet the goal in the governor's executive order, particularly if one or two other recommendations that the Department of Environmental Quality are sort of leaning towards recommending, particularly if they come through. And so we're working on this. We're trying to get the Environmental Quality Commission to push back against the department on this particular recommendation.
Is there anything that anybody else
I think that's
needs
to
to
what
do?
you were referring, right?
It is.
Sorry?
That's exactly what I was referring to. Is there anything that anyone else needs to do, concerned citizens at this point, or?
Yeah, if anybody wants to get involved in this, please shoot me an email. It's very easy, Alan, ALAN, at SOCAN, SOCAN.eco. I'll drop that in the chat in just a second because people forget it's eco at the end. And I'd be more than happy to link you up with folks at the Department of Environmental Quality that I think it would be great for us to be contacting them and saying, we out here in rural Oregon reject your suggestion that electricity should be exempt. And it may sound odd that I'm saying that, but one of the things, if you've been part of this whole issue for any length of time, you will realize one of the arguments that the opponents to action on climate change constantly make in Oregon is, well, it's all those Portland liberals that are causing the problem. If they would just go back to Portland and behave themselves, they wouldn't be putting the rest of us in Oregon through this hassle. And so everybody needs to know rural Oregons care about climate chaos. We want to address it. And so I recommend folks get in touch with DEQ. Our two representatives here, Jeff Golden and Pam Marsh, are champions when it comes to acting on climate change. But if you live in Medford, shoot Kim Wallen a note, and I can certainly send you a note, an address to do that.
Yeah, great. I guess I'd like to ask Tom what advice you would give to other jurisdictions where policymakers might be looking at doing some kind of restriction on new natural gas.
So I think the argument is one that says it's much better for the environment in all kinds of ways, and I think the the presentation on the problems of in-home natural gas burning are the really dominant ones. But in terms of where governments can go, at least, you know, what I know is California, and it's in the building codes. And so what you have to do is you have to look at the building codes, and you have to go with the building codes, and the methodology that's being used in all of those cities in California is going after building efficiency. And so what you say is, and even at that point, you can actually, you know, you can drop back, and if you know, it's hard to build buildings with gas that are as efficient as buildings built with electricity. And so that is the method that has been used throughout California. I can't talk to other states, but the ones that I've seen here, that is what's been done. I think the other issue is the just transition issue is a big deal. One of the other organizations that I'm a member of, the Building Decarbonization Coalition, ran a series of 5 or 6 meetings like this that discussed various elements of that. How do you go about shutting off a feeder line? You have to have everybody to agree to convert to electricity, which is extremely difficult to do. And you have laws and regulations in the states that say, if you're a citizen of the state and you have the monopoly to deliver gas, you have to have the ability to deliver gas to those people. And so it's an extremely difficult situation, but I think it can be solved. It was solved for the nuclear power plant. I think it can be solved for the gas workers. People are a bit naive and they say, oh, a gas worker can do electrical work. And, you know, maybe if you're 25, you can get retrained. If you're 55, you know, that's maybe much more difficult to do. So this has to be looked at kind of globally. And naturally you would expect gas companies to resist, you know, banning their product. You know, this is very difficult. You know, they have shareholders and they have people working for them, and you know, suddenly they're being told that they're extremely evil, and that we're going to ban your products. So that also is an extremely difficult situation, but it's one that has to be worked through. And I think cities working on the efficiency point of view stand the best chance of getting something through.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think, and one of our questions in the chat alluded to this, that I think it's going to be, it's a huge communications and public relations challenge to get on the message, because, and obviously the branding of the product right from the beginning as natural gas, you know, I think it was marketed as a clean fuel or the bridge to, you know, a carbon-free future. And a lot of people, you know, that message is still being promoted, you know, that it's clean. So I think anyone who is working towards this is going to be have to be very astute from a communication standpoint, or have some kind of funding to be able to get out a different message. There's another question here that I think Alan would be good, and we're going to be wrapping up here in the next couple minutes. The question is, Alan, it is my understanding that there is currently a bill in the Oregon State Legislature that would enact a REACH code, which would make it possible for local municipalities to enact building codes which ban new hookups or some such. Can you speak to that?
Well, I am not familiar with that particular bill, and I just saw that, and it gave me a prod to check for that. I can say there is a lot of discussion within the arena of the Oregon Climate Action Plan in relation to the governor's executive order about enhancing the REACH codes, and if folks haven't been paying attention to building codes, as I had not before I got into this, they may not know what a REACH code is. And I'll just briefly explain it, and Tom can jump in because he was using the term earlier and he might have a better understanding than I do. But essentially what happens is the state has its statewide building codes. But then what they enact on top of that is a set of more stringent potential codes that municipalities and counties can enact if they wish. And that's what this question is about. And I'm going to check the list of bills. I don't think we had that particular bill on our SOCAN list of preferred bills, but certainly one of the things we'd like to do is at least allow municipalities and counties or whatever to enact the kind of thing that they did in Berkeley. But one of the big problems we have, and Tom again was alluding to this, is the power of the natural gas associations. And if you remember the screen of icons that Tom showed on the entities that are opposing the kind of thing that he's proposing, I saw the Northwest Natural Gas Association was one of them. And regrettably, everywhere we go trying to get reasonable greenhouse gas emissions reduction plans in place, the natural gas companies and the natural gas associations are standing as roadblocks to everything we're trying to do. And Tom identified the problem. Their product is killing our planet. And what we're saying to them is, no, we want to ban your product.
Mhm.
So we do have a tricky problem here.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
And
Jim, go ahead.
So, just a real quick you identified reach codes exactly. The state sets the standard. This is the minimum, and then the various governmental entities beyond that, meaning the cities and the counties as identified, can then go ahead and say, oh, your number is 15%. We're going to go for 20 or whatever the situation is, and we're going to do it by doing X, Y, and Z.
Right. Okay. And notice that Jim New put some, okay, there's a couple people put information about HB 2398 is a work session scheduled for Monday, March 29th at 1 p.m. So you Oregon State Legislature watchers, that's the reach code bill to watch in the House. And I, at the risk of opening up a slightly different topic at 8:28, I really had it in mind that I really wanted the answer to this question from someone reliable, which is someone talk about what is the difference between renewable natural gas and fracked gas? Because I think we hear this, like I know our buses here are running mostly on renewable natural gas. And are we supposed to feel better about renewable natural gas than we do feel about fossil gas? So Alan, help us understand this.
I'll give it a shot. I wish you'd have brought this up a bit earlier. 2 minutes is rather
Not
difficult.
enough. Okay.
And I've gone through a series of education of myself about renewable natural gas. Essentially, there are two ways to produce this thing called renewable natural gas. One is to produce something that's a synthetic product, which essentially means ripping water apart and sticking the hydrogen into carbon dioxide and making methane. The catch with that is it's an incredibly energetically expensive process. So it is only reasonable to do it if the energy you're using to do it is a renewable energy source. If you're using fossil fuels to drive that separation of water, then you're behind the emissions. But the methane that you have generated from that process, then when it's burned, it's simply, the argument goes, it simply releases the carbon dioxide that you just put the hydrogen in back into the atmosphere. And so you're not taking greenhouse gases from hundreds of millions of years ago atmosphere and putting them into our atmosphere. It's a current carbon dioxide molecule that you're putting back into the atmosphere. So that's one mechanism. And the other is the sort of biogas mechanism, which basically relies on the oxygen-free decomposition process and the term for that is anaerobic. And that's what happens in cattle's guts that produces the methane that they belch out. It's anaerobic fermentation. And we can do that with organic matter. And that's what they do at Dry Creek landfill, for example. And the benefit to that over the fracking process is it has to be sealed. And so there shouldn't be from that process the kind of methane leakage that I was talking about in relation to fracking. So long as we're not then putting that through pipelines that leak massively, one can make a case that that would be better than fracked natural gas. The problem that there are a number of problems, however, with that. And one is, do we actually have the capacity to make as much renewable natural gas as we would need if we wanted to replace that fracked natural gas? And the answer is almost certainly not. Ironically, the best way to do this is to increase the number of confined animal feedlot operations across the country. And I don't think anybody's going to say that's a great idea.
Okay.
Because CAFOs actually do have a vast amount of manure that they have to do something with.
Okay.
So it's not simple. I'm gradually coming down to the position that it's almost certainly not a good idea.
Okay. And it also, I've heard it, you're maintaining all that natural gas infrastructure, right? Because you're going to continue to need fossil gas, is what you're saying. So for people who like me who aren't scientists,
yeah, exactly.
shouldn't
If we can't replace it all with RNG, then we are locking ourselves into continuing to frack to fill out the supply.
Right. Okay. And Jim New, did you want to say anything about you were the one that was sharing about the legislation? You just typed something else. Did you want to chime in anything here?
No, I actually, Tom and Alan got the House Bill 2398 pretty much. Cities can always make it more restrictive than state. And so that's what the REACH code does, is supposedly allows them to make it a more restrictive. They just can't go the other way, is all that is. And ODOE, just for the RNG, in 2018 put out a report that says that the state of Oregon will only be able to capture or produce 5 to 17% of renewable natural gas through the methods that Alan said. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Jim, what committee is that going to?
Put it in the chat.
Ooh, I do not know. I'm sorry, I don't.
Sorry, I'll find out. I'll find out. Thank you.
Great. This has been a wonderful evening. I want to thank our speakers, our heroic last minute hero, Alan Jourdain. Woohoo! David Farah from OHA. Thank you so much, David, for joining us. Long day for you, I'm sure. And Tom Grayley, thank you so much for joining us from Berkeley and for all the work that you're doing. Really great information. I'm going to be sending around an evaluation, and I hope that you'll add in your evaluation, like what else you'd like to hear about, other topics, but also about natural gas. We didn't talk tonight about equity issues around switching and people's concerns about the expense. We didn't talk about how you would actually make switches in your own home, like the strategies. It's a little tricky to figure that all out. And like groups like Tom's obviously are providing a lot of assistance to consumers to try to figure that out. I will do a little local pitch that Masala in Ashland does cook with induction. And their Oberon's restaurant does as well. And they seem to be quite happy with that. So maybe that's something that can accelerate here in Ashland and in other communities. Thank you all for staying with us to the end. Really appreciate this discussion and look forward to your ideas about future presentations. Thank you so much, panelists, and thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Go Rogue to go!
Yeah, go get your Rogue to Go container. All right, guys. Thank you.
That would make it